So this chapter in Romans, which is chapter 11, is kind of a climax. Oh, the depth and the riches and the wisdom and the knowledge of God, how inscrutable are his judgments and how unsearchable are his ways. Oh, he's blown back by what God has done. Well, what is he seeing? And who are they? Because of their disobedience, they have now disobeyed in order that by virtue of the mercy shown to you, they too may now receive mercy. What is he talking about? Well, remember, we're in the letter to the Romans, so it has strong Jewish overtones. The framework is a discussion of righteousness, which is a wider conversation about how salvation happens. And part of that, if you remember in the first chapter, included a role of God's wrath. And we talked about how God's wrath is not simply this fury that unleashes to induce harm on his people, but is rather the allowance by God for them to suffer the consequences of their choices. Well, what Paul knows as an Israelite is their history. So here they are the people of Israel that God has formed out of the loins of Abraham, and Israel has a mission into the world. And one of the promises of God, Abraham's descendants are meant to be a universal blessing, meaning for all people. And the prophets themselves will even talk about that Israel is meant to be a light to the Gentiles. That word Gentiles often gets translated as nations. So maybe you're familiar, especially during Advent, a light to the nations. The problem is that Israel is just so uncooperative from the beginning. I mean, God has to drag them through the desert, and what was supposed to be 40 days becomes 40 years because they're constantly just rebelling and rebelling. The original people who fled out of Egypt in the Exodus never actually make it to the Holy Land because of their constant rebellion. They end up dying in the desert. It's just like never working out. And in the 8th century BC, 733 BC to be more precise, the Assyrian nation starts wiping out the tribes of Israel. So there's 12 tribes of Israel. They start at the top. If Israel is just sort of shaped like a rectangle, they start at the top and take out Naphtali and Zebulun and the northern tribes at the tip. Then 11 years later in 722, they hit the center of Israel where Samaria is, and they wipe them out. And by the time they're done, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel are totally scattered across Gentile nations. Eventually, a couple centuries later, the Babylonians, who are now the big baddies, they go and they exile the southern ones. So this is like where Jerusalem and Judea is. Now that exile only lasts about 70 years, so it's a short one. But meanwhile, the 10 northern tribes, they're gone. They are scattered across Gentile nations. And all of that is because of their sins. And so Paul is talking about their disobedience. That's who he's talking about. Because of their disobedience, all of these things happen. Well, it seems now that the plan of God is unfulfilled. They have rejected their vocation and their destiny to be a light to the Gentiles. And Paul goes, actually, God's plan is way bigger than that. Because they disobeyed and they got scattered across the Gentile nations, Paul, as an apostle, has to go out and fish for them. But because he's fishing for the Israelites among the Gentiles, who's now hearing the gospel? The Gentiles. So the word of God, the gospel of his son, Jesus Christ, is going out to foreign nations where God is keeping his promise, which was to call his people back to himself. So he has not forgotten them after 700 years. They are being invited to come home, and along with them, through them, in completion of their vocation, which was to invite the Gentile nations in, the actual Gentiles are now hearing the gospel and becoming part of God's plan. They were supposed to be older brothers that bring their younger brother home, and they're still doing it even despite themselves. So he says, you once disobeyed God, but have now received mercy because of their disobedience. Because they got scattered in God's wrath, you are now hearing the gospel. They have disobeyed in order that by the virtue of the mercy shown to you, they too may now receive mercy. So God is being merciful on the lost tribes and the Gentiles. For God delivered everyone to disobedience so that he could have mercy on all. And that's when Paul just explodes. Oh, the depths of the riches and the wisdom and the knowledge of God. He can't hold it in. So what does that mean for us? Folks, the older I get in the spiritual life, the more aware I am of my own mistakes, my own errors, the profundity of my sin, and the discouragement that I can feel as a result of that all the things that God has called me to and the plans that he has had for me are constantly being thwarted by my lack of docility. Paul is telling me we just can't thwart God's plan. We just can't. You're just not that important. You're not that big that God's plan is going to be totally thrown off because I failed or because you failed along the way. And that's meant to be a message of hope for us. God's mercy is so big that he not only redeems us, he redeems the plan that he has for us. And even though it takes another route and it might take a little bit longer, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. The second thing is that it should encourage us when we look at the state of things around us, especially when everything feels like a colossal mess and a disaster. When we think that perhaps maybe God's plan was a failure, that the church is failing. And this message tells us to hang in there because it all swings back around in the end. God doesn't forget a single promise, a single detail, and he sews it all together so that St. Paul himself will say, God works good for all who believe in him. And the church has her marching orders and she believes. So if she has to suffer, if she has to be purified, if she has to just hang in there another day, she does because she is accustomed to a Father who brings it all together, sews the tapestry in order, and ultimately claims the victory. So this is a profound message of hope for all of us. And with that should encourage us to plow forward one step at a time with the confidence that God is blessing our efforts.